morning to each and everybody. Thank you, Vice Rector Professor Baikov. Yeah, we stopped last Monday with our OPEC presentation. I don't recall now which slide, but it was one of the last few ones. It was not OPEC, it was the presentation on fracking. Can you please start the presentation, Maria?
Yes, I have started it from the slide number 10.
Right now there's a slide on which says unconventional exploration, a game changer or a hype.
Yeah, exactly.
Is that it?
Yeah, that should be, but I don't see it on my screen.
There's also a book cover, Die zersplitterte Welt.
Exactly, but I don't see it on my screen. Can you put it so that I see it?
Oh, well. It's like last time, right?
Yeah.
Last time you couldn't see it either.
If it doesn't work, I can go to my other computer. I can solve that.
Can the students see the slide? Can you?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, so if the others see, then I go to my desktop and I check it from there. And so we have solved that. Yeah.
The problem seems to be repeating itself.
Yeah.
I don't really know why.
But there's a solution to most of the things in life except this. So I will go now to my Monday Sul presentation. Sorry for the delay.
No problem.
Demo session fracking. Demo session 5 fracking. Good. So you have the slide with the book cover. Yeah, as I mentioned to you last Monday, I have not been a very strong believer, let's put it like that, in the issue of shale oil and shale gas. I didn't think it would really be that kind of game changer, but it has become. But to be honest, when I wrote my book, Die zersplitterte Welt, The Fragmented World, I also put a topic, a chapter on unconventional oil and gas exploration. And here you see I called it a game changer or a hype. And now in spring 2020, and we already discussed it several times, in the light of current price levels and in the light of the still relatively high exploration costs, one has to rethink the whole topic. I sent a guest comment I wrote on Monday on Nord Stream 2, which has been circulated among you. It's in English. And in that comment, I've also been highlighting the completely reversed market situation due to this very low price level. And we can still discuss it when we move to Nord Stream 2. But let me just recall some aspects. It's not an exhaustive list of aspects, but some that I would like to share with you also as food for thought, maybe for your essay papers, but also, of course, for your approach to the whole topic, maybe in the long run, if you continue to have interest in it. The situation in North America, Canada, and the United States is very particular. It's only there and not in other countries. For example, Poland. I mentioned Poland last week. They would also have loved. They had a lot of projects on the table going into shale gas, shale oil exploration. China was thinking about it. In several Southern American countries, there were ideas, even in France and Germany. Why did it not materialize there? Why do we always speak of US and Canada when we speak of shale? For two main reasons. One is a legal one in terms of open land, common land that belongs to the government. And the other one is, of course, the vastness of the country and also the abundance of water to a certain extent, because you need a lot of oil. So it's a very particular geological and legal situation. But again, we always have to bear in mind, and I think this is the the best technical reference also to always keep in mind when we discuss oil markets, energy markets, etc. by and large. In the end, it always breaks down to the price issue, to the costs, to supply and demand. Just to give you one example, Royal Dutch Shell stopped all shale drilling in North America already 7 years ago because they said it's simply too expensive for us. We prefer to go into big oil, big money. I say now, I don't know whether they said it like that, in terms of conventional oil drilling, which is easier, where you simply have you have an easier access, costs are lower, and to the Royal Dutch Shell management, it made more sense. So the US decision to say an announcement already 10 years ago, we, the United States, are heading for self-sufficiency. We can even become an oil and gas net exporter. It really was a big story 10 years ago. And to be very honest, I didn't share that kind of enthusiasm. And the question I put here, will it last? And this is the main question, because in the end, it's a matter of costs. And you remember the slide we had in one of the first, I think the very first session, exploration costs. And when exploration costs are relatively high, and this is still the case for the fracking industry, in times of very low price levels, it simply doesn't make sense. What we see currently in the US is a series of bankruptcy filing by medium-sized, but also relatively important fracking companies. Continental is one of them. They have given up nearly 40% of all their projects in one of the most important fields, the so-called back-end field. They hadn't been hedging against this low price. They hadn't been buying future or selling future contracts. So this is one of the many, many problems. And the issue is simply, and will remain, to what extent will North American shale oil and shale gas reach outside markets at such price levels? I've been reading yesterday that several LNG vessels, starting from LNG terminals in the United States, where this gas is liquefied. LNG stands for liquefied natural gas. So you change the aggregate, the state of aggregate, I think you say in English, and you transform it into liquid. That's how it can be easier transported, and that's how the US companies also wanted to turn its interest into the, or to turn business into the on the European continent. Maria, can we please go to the next slide? Do you see it already? Because I don't see it here. You got it? Hello? Yeah. Maria? Because unfortunately today I don't see anybody on the screen.
Yes, there's a slide now up. Erdgasversorgung.
Okay, very good. Because for some reason I have nothing on the screen here. So I watch it on my desktop. Erdgasversorgung, traditionell via pipelines. I put it here in German. I took one of my German one. Or LNG. This is also the topic of the comment that I wrote a few days ago. Erdgasversorgung, supply of natural gas as opposed to liquefied natural gas coming out of fracking. You remember, different type of exploration, fracking more technology and more cost intense, and also more harmful to the environment. All kind of oil and gas exploration is harmful to the environment, but fracking is even much more. So you see here some of the main big pipelines that have been in existence for at least 50 years, some of them 30, 40 years, and some projects. It's a matter of principle. Do you opt for pipelines or do you opt for LNG? This is the main thrust of the topic that I would like to share with you here. What's the advantage of pipeline transport It's cheaper, big advantage. And it's also for a consumer and also for a supplier, I would say to a certain extent, it is more reliable. What are the big disadvantages? It's a pity that we are not facing each other really in a room, because then we could be much more interactive, but we will do that with the question session. What is the big disadvantage of the whole thing? Transit countries. Unless you have direct transport. Nord Stream is such a direct transport line. But most of the time, when you have pipeline transport, you have to compromise or regulate whatever conditions of transit, pricing, several also often environmental issues, but above all, geopolitical issues. That has been the case with Nord Stream, about which we will speak in a second. That has been particularly also the case about South Stream, about which we will not speak so much, because for reasons of time, if there's a question, we can definitely do it. But we already had a question a few weeks ago about this Gazprom treaty between Austria and the Soviet Union that was launched back in 1968. Against all odds of the then existing Cold War, not only Cold War, Soviet invasion in Czechoslovakia, and the whole tension that we had in the summer of 1968. Nevertheless, the then 100% national oil and gas company OMV decided to start business with the Soviet Union in terms of long-term gas supply. 2 years ago, 50 years of Gazprom supply was highly celebrated. And this is just to recall, it's always a political issue. It's not only a matter of supply and demand, but politics always enter. The question is, in my eyes, to what extent is politics a shaper, decisive, or in the end, will it be all about supply and demand? And another topic that we will discuss in a second is when it comes to historic sentiments, emotions, because they also play a role in political decision-making, and they play a role in particular, we see it all over the globe, in energy alliances and energy confrontations. So this pipeline system, the different lessons drawn from the first gas supply crisis back in January 2006, then followed by a second one in January 2009, which was even harsher. Everybody was speaking about diversification, new import, different forms of technology, etc., etc. One of the outcomes of that was also Nord Stream. If I may ask you for the next slide. So you see here Nord Stream. Nord Stream was not yet called 1. It was simply Nord Stream. Now we speak of Nord Stream 2. This is the second strength, so to say. It's actually number 3 and 4, because 1 and 2 were already in existence ever since 2011, 2012. And it's about 1,200 and something kilometers long. And this is a direct transport connection from the Russian Federation to northern Germany, going through the Baltic Sea. Nord Stream was discussed as a project, not yet being called Nord Stream, in the early 2000s as intrinsic part of the EU-Russia energy dialogue. The dialogue between EU and the Russian Federation was very intense, very regular, mostly turning around energy topics, not only, but this was somehow the centerpiece in my observation. Until 2014, all the developments, you remember, of spring 2014, Crimea, fights in eastern Ukraine, etc. So Nord Stream was a topic. It existed, people discussed it, feasibility studies were done. But the final decision to do it on a political level was taken in 2005. In 2005, the then German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder concluded a bilateral agreement with his counterpart, President Putin. and that caused a lot of debate inside the European Union, to say the least. The then Polish Minister of Defense, he later on became Minister of Foreign Affairs, but then he was in charge of defense, was Radosław Sikorski. And his first reaction as a Polish patriot, let's call him like that, that's what he saw himself and still sees himself, I think, is this is a replay of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. So recalling 1939, recalling Soviet-German partitioning spheres of influence in the region. He was seconded by huge protests from the Baltic. Now, what we heard back in 2005, 2006, the same elements came up in 2017 when Nord Stream 2 was decided on paper in spring 2017 because of increasing demand from Germany for natural gas from Russia. The involved companies said, let's do a Nord Stream 2. And this time, the protests on a political level were even stronger, I would say, or as strong, like we saw in 2005, 2006. Big difference this time, the existence, the accessibility of North American shale gas for the rest of the world, for the European market. I was in 2017, 18, 19 Minister for Foreign Affairs, and it happened to me on many occasions that my counterparts among EU colleagues would start a debate during a bilateral meeting and saying, be aware, Nord Stream 2, etc. We know an Austrian company is also involved next to some German companies, and also Royal Dutch Shell is part of the whole thing. We don't like it too much. You should be careful, this and that. So there was a huge debate. It was a recurrent topic at various meetings. Now, I'm not, how should I say? I'm not linked to OMV or to any of the companies. I'm not in their supervisory boards or whatever. I'm just the analyst who has been observing this topic for some years. And my response was very often, nobody builds a pipeline to please or to annoy somebody. A pipeline is built, in particular with such a huge involvement of also international gas companies, because there is a need, because there is demand. But I could see, and we can still see it in the current situation, how much this pipeline, whether in its first version, it started in 2012 to deliver, or in its current second planned version, that the second part, is highly contested, has become a very emotional topic. And I just mentioned that to share with you this idea. Energy supply, energy alliances, constructing pipelines, it's above all supply and demand. It's above all a commercial, a technical decision making. But we also always have to bear in mind old angst themes, like the one I mentioned to you by quoting the Polish minister and the Baltic opposition, etc. So it's there, and it has a say. So it is something that is an intrinsic part also of the relations between the European Union and the Russian Federation. On the next slide, you can see that the EU-Russian Federation connection in terms of Energieversorgung, the part of Russia has, is important and is increasing. So it's all about energy, and this also causes different reactions. Some consider it as useful, and others say, no, not at all. This is not something that we would like to see. Just to share with you the importance of the whole topic. On the next slide, you will see it's from BP. They have really nice material in terms of graphic and so on to illustrate certain elements. Here you can also see the major gas trade movements across the world. And you can see that the US is mostly still an internal, but self-supplying more and more, and wishing to export more, wishing to go also to the European market, which is done by on an increasing level by LNG vessels. You have above the graph going from the Russian Federation to the west, but also to regions like Turkey and partially Middle East. You see here Nigeria, and you see India and China being supplied by both the Russian Federation and by the Middle East. On the next slide, the Russian-Chinese cooperation, which fully started in May 2014, but it had already started before, and actually as of 2004, in Shanghai in May 2014, a huge list of bilateral contracts were concluded. And ever since last December, we already mentioned it, the Power of Siberia gas pipeline started. And we had also the oil supply already going on beforehand. So gas supply, both directions, going west, going east, is an important topic. And here again, when we speak of those pipeline grids from Russia to China, it's also something that signals a longer term cooperation. When you export your gas and oil via vessels, for you as a producer, it's sometimes easier to switch your clients. You can switch your clients for commercial reasons because there's somebody who pays more, or you might also change for fundamental political reasons. Now, this is the topic of passage through the Arctic with the climate changes in terms of permanent ice, and this could also still make a change. We will see about gas pipelines, gas production, etc. But here, as I mentioned to you last time, all kind of Arctic deep sea drilling has been abandoned due to the very low price level, and I don't think that anything will change here for the foreseeable future. I would like to finish now this one here with simply one topic, because we spoke about Asia a bit, we spoke about geopolitics, and I forgot, that's why I put it in here, I forgot to mention also, of course, the current, no, it's nothing new, it had started already a long time ago, situation between China and the United States in Far Asia, in the so-called Chinese Sea, Southern Chinese Sea, the very last slide you see here. Who has access to which sea strait, exclusive zone? I will still share that with you to a larger degree today. And there are three smaller maps which are illustrative for the many territorial disputes that we have in the Chinese Sea. This map is also about 25 years old, so it's nothing new. It's only that it has increased, and it could still even increase more in the light of the deteriorating atmosphere, at least, that we have between Washington and Beijing. We have problems around the so-called Spratly Islands, which are claimed by both China and Vietnam. We have a huge old problem going on between Japan and China around the Senkaku Islands, as the Japanese call it, or if I can pronounce it somehow correctly, the Diaoyu Islands, as the Chinese claim it. And we have the old issue with the Philippines going on, where the International Court of Justice 2-3 years ago declared that China has breached international law. In the meantime, the Philippine government under Duterte has become a very much connected to China. So they say, well, we don't care about that. We prefer cooperating with China, whatever the International Court of Justice says in our favor. So there is that. This is just an illustration of various elements to give you an idea. When we speak of oil and gas exploration, because we have been focusing a lot on pricing, on supply and demand, but history, geopolitics, international law, and unfortunately also resentments, emotions, they can always have a say and come into. And I would like to conclude with one quote by Winston Churchill, who I think I already used it once here because it's my favorite quote by him on that topic. He said, before World War I, liberty lies in diversity and in diversity alone. So meaning, whether you are a producer or a consumer, try to diversify your partners to a large extent, so not to be too reliant on one. And whether it's now, again, whether you are a consumer or producer, or whether you are a tiny business person, it's always good to have more partners in case there is whatever kind of economic slump, political breakdown, and so on. It's good to have diversified and not to go only west, to go only east, to be only dependent on one major supplier, but to diversify. And that has been the slogan as such within EU debates on energy. So here we are. I may now pass on the floor to Andrey or to Maria for the debate, because I don't see here anybody.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Now,
I see you.
dear students, any questions from the floor? Any raised hands, please? Can't see anyone for now.
Good morning. Yes, I would have a question.
Hello,
Carla.
Carla.
Good morning, Dr. Kneissl. I was wondering if you could explain a bit more about the map of the Nord Stream 2. So there are like different squares of different colors for different sites. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, these are, thank you very much. These are the zones where the territorial water or the exclusive maritime zone of, for instance, Sweden, Poland, some Baltic countries is concerned. So when Nord Stream 1 started, and we had a similar situation now with Nord Stream 2, even though it had been resolved as far as I understood in the first phase, Sweden and Baltic countries and Poland and Denmark opposed the project inter alia for ecological reasons, saying here in the Baltic Sea there's a risk of chemic, toxic, explosive ammunition that stems from World War II. I apologize, I'm not fully informed now what happened with that issue, whether the engineers could make sure that those vessels were sealed or whatever, but somehow it was resolved. So we had opposition, if you want, protests, second thoughts, whatever you call it, not only from Poland, but also from countries like Sweden and Denmark, because they consider themselves also as riparian, as being affected. And it's all about the maritime territorial zones of the respective countries.
Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
More questions, please?
Hello, yes, please. I have another question.
Yes, Elvin,
Yes,
go
hello.
ahead.
As we know, OMV, Austrian oil company OMV, is involved in Nord Stream 2, and
Yeah.
the interest is also, that Nord Stream 2 would strengthen Austria's Baumgarten hub.
You're very well informed.
I wanted to write my essay on the role, on the impact of Nord Stream 2 on the role of the German position on the European gas market, or on the German gas hub. And which is also expected to increase or to become more important. And would you say that there would be like a conflict of interest between Germany and Austria because both expect their position to be strengthened?
Yeah. Thank you very much. You're very well informed about the topic. I don't see the Austrians here competing really. The big difference, let's look at it from a corporate level, is the following. OMV is still 43 something, I think, % state-owned. The rest is listed on the stock market. But OMV, even so, it's now, you cannot compare it to other oil or energy companies. It's not a big player. It's a small, medium sized. But it has a national, it's still something, you can call it a national oil company. Definitely it is. What we have in Germany, we have a very strong federal system, and we have many companies, whether it's Wintershall, whether it's RWE, whether it is all the others. I mean, in the Nord Stream, it's Wintershall, I think, which is the main company. These companies are not under state control, you know. So it's they run it by themselves. Yes, of course, they meet the government. They meet maybe more on a Länder level than on a federal level. They might have their importance, but OMV, even though it's not a big player, but it still has a governmental aspect, what Wintershall doesn't have, you know. And also to draw your attention to the very specific situation that we have in Germany, it is the announcement, I would call it still more a project and announcement than it's something that is fully now materializing, is the famous Energiewende, German energy transition, announced by Chancellor Merkel in 2011 against the backdrop of the nuclear disaster in Japan. It happened on 11th of March 2011, I think it was 2011 or 2012. The government, the German government, announced 24 hours after that nuclear disaster that Germany would immediately move out of all its nuclear energy mix. And that came as a big surprise. Now, with that, Germany has a very specific role inside Europe, a very contested one also, I would say. It would merit another 1 or 2 hours to discuss it. But if you want to dwell on that subject, it's interesting because I mentioned, I think it's at an earlier stage, in Germany, in Europe, we don't even have one common energy mentality. You know, we have no common energy policy, but in Germany and in Austria, on a popular level, people are very, very critical about nuclear. The Austrians have an obsession, I must say, you know, where at the European Council meeting, when the Austrians would raise their voice and say, well, we don't like this and that, it's a reflex, it's an instinctive no to nuclear. It's not a rational one, it's an instinctive one. Now, I don't want to ironize it, just to describe it. And that also causes regular trouble with our immediate neighbors, such as the Czech Republic, Slovenia, also Italy, which have nuclear in their energy mix. France, 80% of electric power production in France is generated by nuclear. 80%. They have 50-something nuclear power stations. Now, you can also contest the security level, the quality, etc. of those, the different topic. But the fact that Germany, #1 economy, in a very unilateral way, moved out of nuclear and said, from now on, we will go completely renewable, has put a lot of question marks. And in my assessment, the problem is not so much about a German-Austrian rivalry. At least I don't see it, but I'm not involved. Maybe there is one. I have no idea. Maybe on a technical level. So I have no idea, honestly. But what I see is the German energy transition is very, very expensive. And so far, it has not yielded the results. Given the tremendous economic quagmire in which we are in. Question is, can you force your industry, can you force the households to pay this extra mile for going renewable? Or will there be maybe a decision making in the sense, let's switch or let's remain for a longer time with the fairly affordable gas that we receive via pipeline? This I think is the crux of the matter, because under current situation, if I were a government decision maker, a government decision shaper, I would say now we have to really think, how can we make life easier for our population, for our industry? And we cannot impose on them another regulation, another investment, which they simply can't make right now. So my gut feeling is that the German energy transition, and that I think it's more kind of gut feeling. I don't yet have any kind of empirical facts on that. That has to happen. But I would say in today's circumstances, we will see industry, governments remain for a longer time with a fossil fuel energy mix than complying with the agenda that was before the pandemic.
Yes, definitely. I agree with that. I think this is all going to be delayed due to the current situation and the situation after the crisis. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Looking forward to reading your essay.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions?
Actually, I'm trying to raise my hand, but may I ask a question?
Please. Yeah.
Thank you a lot for the first part of your lecture. My question covers the quantitative aspect, as you said, and as we know, political factor influences the location of a pipeline, and I'm just interested which pipelines require the highest transmission costs. Mm-hmm. So, and is this Brotherhood pipeline, Bruderschaft, Bratstva in this list of the most expensive pipelines also?
I must admit, I have no idea. I mean, the costs of maintenance has a lot to do with whether you're onshore or offshore. That's all what I would say as a first, response. Nord Stream, of course, is expensive. It means laying pipeline in the deep sea bed. For that, you need specific ships. Now the US has put the company that provides a certain ship that can do that on a sanction list. A new ship has to be organized, means delay, etc. And all these delays mean costs, because you have to keep people on your payroll, you have to delay other projects, etc., etc. But the moment you go offshore, the moment you go into the sea, high sea or a locked sea like the Baltic to a certain extent, but still it's sea, it's harsh weather conditions, etc., that costs you much more in building and above all in maintaining the maintenance costs than if you have a pipeline that is completely onshore, on the land, in the plain, not going through mountains, etc., not going through seismic, earthquake, dangerous parts. Let's take, for instance, BTC, Baku, Tiflis, Ceyhan pipeline that also stirred up tremendous political discussion. Not only discussion, we even had government changes like the one in Georgia. I think it was 2003 also, when Shevardnadze was replaced by Saakashvili government. But it was all about also where to trace the pipeline, bringing Azeri gas via Turkey to the European market, a project under leadership of BP. Huge international debate on the whole thing. And here the engineering costs were also relatively high, not only for all the pre-costs that you had, but also in terms of the rather dangerous tracing through parts of Turkey which are known and in danger for earthquakes. So all these geological elements have to be taken into consideration. But honestly, I don't have a list. I've not seen a list. Maybe there is one. Which pipelines are the most expensive and for which reasons?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
As well. Yeah.
We have a raised hand from Paola Tocossi. Can you speak up, please, Paola?
Yes, I'm here. Dr. Kneissl, thank you for the lecture again. I'm very interested in the Arctic region development, and I wanted to know your opinion, because that one is a very hot spot for geopolitics in this moment, and it has a huge natural resource of potential, but at the same time, it's still underdeveloped, has a huge potential also for the Northern Sea route development going east, but it's still stopped by both the sanctions, the oil prices, the market, and also Russia's economy. I wanted to know your opinion.
Let me start to reply to your very pertinent question by the following. When I open up a British magazine, I would see at least every second week, and that for the last 10, 15 years, an announcement, opportunities in the Arctic, workshop on how to do business in the Arctic. When I go to the German-speaking world, in particular Germany, but Austria is not an important player. We don't have actors in that sense. But let's oppose London to Berlin on that topic. In the Anglo-Saxon world, you have this mentality of opportunities. You know, this is a new opportunity. Thanks, I'm now exaggerating again. Thanks to climate change, we have the Northwest Passage ice-free for at least half a year or even longer. That's what will facilitate and reduce costs for transporting goods, material, even drilling in that region. And these are opportunities. So the Anglo-Saxon approach is, let's go for this new opportunity. The approach in various parts of the German-speaking world, and I must say my instinctive reaction to that is a bit, oh my God, climate change, the melting of the ice bed, what will that mean to the rising sea level? What will that mean to the destruction of cities close to the sea, be it New York, be it London? So I see problems and I don't see opportunities. And I think this is a major difference. And I don't know which school of thinking will prevail. But I don't see us also now being able to tackle the whole cycle, the whole dynamic that is happening in such a way that we can really handle it. So best thing to speak maybe in a Darwinistic approach is, and Darwin was all about adapting to the new situation, you know. So you somehow have to adapt, you have to manage, you have to do a different way of urbanism, etc. And that leads us to the whole debate of climate change, fighting climate change, yes, with which means adapt, adjust, or stop it. I don't see us being able to stop it. But adapt and adjust to it. And the Anglo-Saxon approach, at least what I see from the many workshops that are offered in London and conferences, it's opportunities. Go for it, investment, etc. And this is not the case by others, including myself. But we'll speak more about that still in the next half an hour, because for the next presentation, I will speak about that. Huh?
Thank you, Dr.
You're welcome, Paola.
Okay, we have no more raised hands, so
thank you, Andrey, that
back
you have
into the lecture mode.
Yeah.
Okay, Maria, will you please put up the slides?
Yeah, the fighting climate change thing, please.
Fighting climate change.
Thank you. We'll do the experts. This is just a short one. Maybe we can still do it today. Do you have it?
Yes, it's on the title, the title slide, the first one.
Fighting climate. Okay, so then let's start it. It enters now very well with the question that Paola had asked on the Arctic and where do we move to, etc., etc. So fighting climate change, and what does that mean for the combustion engine? What does it mean for the whole oil industry as such we're talking about? So the topics I would like to share with you are climate change, weather extremes, the debate, you might know it. There is still a very controversial debate, mostly in the US, but not only there. Is it a man-made or is it a natural phenomenon topic? We also have, and this I think is maybe more interesting for us in terms of international relations, it is a true North-South issue. And I will elaborate on that in more detail. Just let me say here, the measuring of temperature is usually started by going back to the 1750s. Why the 1750s? Because it was in mid-18th century that the steam engine, the coal-powered steam engines, started to conquer at least certain parts of Europe. So it all started with the Industrial Revolution in Great Britain, in England in particular, the Industrial Revolution, which arrived with a certain delay in other parts of Europe. In the case of Austria, I can say we were latecomers to the Industrial Revolution, at least 110, 120 years later than it started in England. And of course, the industrial development of North America, steam engines as the power engine. And here we can see that temperature started to rise. Now, in today's circumstances, with then still number 2, soon number 1 economy, the People's Republic of China, they will tell you at many instances, well, why should we renounce on industrial, on society development if you, the North, started it all with polluting? We now have a different political debate, the political level of the whole thing. It has been changing in China over the last 10 years, but still, when we speak about who pays what, compensation funds, etc., for countries which are hit by climate change but which don't get the money, you can feel the North-South issue very much coming up, and we'll still discuss it. Fighting climate change on an international level has started in the early 1990s. The Rio de Janeiro Climate Change Framework Convention, Kyoto Protocol, national efforts, EU efforts, etc. So it has been there, but we can say not very effective, to say the least. I already mentioned to one of your colleagues the German case of energy transition, or as the German notion is Energiewende. So wenden, shifting, changing, transition. And of course, we also always have to bear in mind the many, many costs of climate change. So in the case of Europe, it's often also linked to, well, we have to fight climate change because otherwise there will be even more migration. This is the big theme that hits the public debate in many countries. Big topic in Austria on a constant level. Let me share with you on the next slide, this greenish one, the Climate Change Vulnerability Index. Now, this is a bit old. I looked up yesterday some other, but it's more or less the same, so I kept that one. When you look at this map, everything that is bluish carries an extreme risk, and where it's greenish, it's a low risk. Where do we have the biggest level of vulnerability being exposed to climate change. It's South Asia. South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Pakistan are these countries with the biggest damages when it comes to climate change. The monsoon season being delayed, being too harsh, being too low, very hot summers in India, tremendous flooding. We have only had 2 weeks ago another extreme flood situation in these 3 countries. We all remember, this is just as a footnote, but to give you the idea also of media perception. In 2006, December 2006, the tsunami happened, and the world has ever since been talking about tsunami. Why did the tsunami of the 26th of December 2006 catch all our attention? I don't want to sound sarcastic or ironic, but it was for the very simple reason that countries like Sri Lanka and Thailand were harshly hit, and lots of Europeans were doing holidays there. So this was, in my eyes, it was the main reason why there was this tremendous reporting on the tsunami and commemoration days, etc. And just 4 or 5 weeks prior to the tsunami, in November 2006, there was a huge flood in Pakistan, I think with more or less the same number of victims. Nobody spoke about it. No tourists were hit, and what is even more important, and I think this is something to bear in mind, and I would like to share that with you also to keep it as a main message of today's topic. It's there were no insured values. When a farmer, be it in Bangladesh or be it in the Horn of Africa, another region that is harshly hit, loses his livestock, his animals, or loses his vegetable fields to a flood, to a drought, to whatever, it's a loss. It's a personal and economic loss that he, his tribe, family, etc. have to bear. And if they can't recover, they then become food supply receivers in some refugee camp somewhere in the region. This is the dreadful situation for many. When a big storm hits England, France, we had the big storm Lothar, I think it was in December 2000 or 2002, insured values are hit. 2002, summer 2002, we had tremendous floods in Central Europe. A city like Prague was hit. A city like Dresden was tremendously hit also by the floods then. Austria, parts of Austria were harshly hit. I know many people who lost a lot, but they had the so to say the good luck in the bad situation. Their insurers paid somehow, so you are not left in the outside. But insurance companies also later on changed the policy because they saw, oh my God, these floods now they don't come once in a century, but they can come every 5 years. I just would like to share that thought with you that insurance companies, in particular the reinsurers, in the insurance business, you have the regular insurance company when you have your house insured with your local, provincial, whatever insurer. And if this insurance company runs into big risks for which it doesn't have all the capital coverage, they turn to a reinsurer. So the insurance companies are reinsured with a huge one. Münchner Rück, Swiss Re. These are two, and there must be some others. I'm only aware now of these two, are big reinsurers. And these insurance companies over the last 20 years have come to the conclusion, we pay and pay and pay, and the risks become higher. We have to rearrange our policy in terms of what is covered, what is not covered. And also we would like to be somehow involved in non-fossil investments. We would like to go into investments because insurance companies are players in the financial markets. It's not only the big investment houses. It's not only the JP Morgans and so on. It's more and more also huge insurance companies. And they they can make a certain change. For instance, Allianz, a big German insurance company, which owns a huge list of insurance companies in Central Eastern Europe, together with World Wildlife Fund, back in 2005, made a kind of green fund. I don't know what they exactly called it, but they say, let's invest here. And this is, I think, a topic that has to be borne in mind, because not in those parts of the world where people are harshly hit, there is no insuring. I know that some economists, UN agencies, they think about it. What can be done? Can there be some kind of grassroots popular insurance company coverage, whatever? But this is a key problem. So South Asia, highly exposed, very, very vulnerable. Next region that is just exposed is Eastern Africa. It's Horn of Africa. People had been losing in countries like Somalia, Kenya, livestock over years. Again, not insured. Madagascar, very harshly hit. Mozambique also. When we hear about natural disasters, countries like Mozambique and Zimbabwe, they never leave the headlines. Tremendous storms, floods, cyclones, etc. In South America, it's mostly the Caribbeans, which are mostly hit. And inside the European neighborhood, it's mostly North Africa, the Maghreb, which is hit by desertification, and it's the Eastern Mediterranean that is harshly hit. So you will read voices which say, attention, attention, the many conflicts in the Middle East, forget about all these historic issues, who owns what, whose capital is Jerusalem, etc., etc. The real issue will be the loss of arable land, desertification, absence of rain, water problem. So here you see, and what is striking is that those countries which actually started climate change, which are today very much responsible because of their footprint, their ecological footprint, because of their high per capita, not only use, but let's bluntly call it waste of energy, with the way people eat meat. We know that high meat consumption, etc., also plays into it. It's more and more discussed now. The miles that you travel by airplane, etc. So it's all that, and this is definitely much more happening in the northern hemisphere, in the northwestern hemisphere, than it is the case for the people of the Horn of Africa. They don't take a plane every second week to Brussels or whatever. They simply are stuck where they are and try to have subsistential survival. So the vulnerability index shows us very clearly which countries are exposed, and honestly, it's not their fault. It's not the fault of Bangladesh or the people in Pakistan or Madagascar to pay this tremendous price for what is happening where we have man-made climate change. I still do the next slide, and then if you want, because I've already said here now certain refer to certain topics which maybe the participants would like to evoke. But let me share with you this slide. I like it because it's also so topical in our current situation. The World Economic Forum, WEF, which makes its big conferences in Davos at the beginning of every year. They have a list which is called the 10 imminent threats to global security, or the potential black swans also. Pandemic, up, much more rapid climate change, EU collapse, collapsed China, a reformed Iran as a good or whatever here in the next way, a nuclear war. What do we have? Solar storms. Now, this is also, of course, a scenario, but I honestly have never dealt with it. US disengagement happening. Now, this slide is not a new one. It's not a recent one. But I would like simply to draw your attention. It has been on the agenda. Pandemic has been on the agenda, so you can't really call it a genuine black swan. We all knew that it would happen. But it's on the same level, more or less, with much more rapid climate change taking place. And a pandemic, still you can somehow get it under control through quarantine measures, etc. But the climate change development, etc., is a bit more difficult to handle, to say the least. So what I would suggest for time reasons, you can read the next 3-4 slides. You can read them because I quote here from different topics. I would not like now to spend too much time on that, but I would like to go to the slide, high hopes for the Copenhagen conference, December 2009, and then the next one, and then we go into our debate. Please, Maria, do you see here the high hope for the Copenhagen conference?
Yes.
Thank you. Copenhagen, December 2009. Huge gathering. I was not there, but I spoke to some people who were there, and they explained to me that it was the biggest, first time the climate change policy had come to such a high political level. We had about 115 political leaders attending. Everybody was there, and it was also, I must say, a big media hype. You had this North-South gap. You had huge demonstrations, because you have to imagine 2009, that was just in the aftermath of the financial crisis, saving banks, etc. So ecological NGOs like Greenpeace would stand in front of the conference building in Copenhagen saying, if the earth were a bank, it would have been saved, rightly. And you had this tremendous North-South gap. And also, to come back to international relations, it was the first year Obama was president. So let us click to the next one, the Copenhagen conference, also North-South conflict. You have here a picture that was taken sometimes early morning. You see here Obama, you see Sarkozy, you see Angela Merkel, Barroso. I think the people of those times, only Angela Merkel is left. A colleague who was there, he explained to me the following, and I think this is very telling. He said it was a very highly political atmosphere, with lots of misunderstandings, with lots of misperceptions. As I said, it was the first year of Obama, and you might remember from reading or so, because it's 10 years ago, some of you were still at school, maybe following international relations, but Obama, in his first year, getting also the Nobel Prize all of a sudden in his first year, was hailed as a kind of messiah. So he came on a Thursday, I think, and on Saturday, the conference, after 2 weeks of open-up negotiations, was supposed to finish. And all the other egos who were there, the Sarkozys, etc., they didn't have the stage they wanted, maybe. So lots of human misunderstandings, lots of human, what we call in German Befindlichkeiten, resentments, frustrations, whatever. They also play a role in negotiations, humans. And the Chinese delegation somehow conveyed, there was a transmission of communication that Obama should meet a Chinese, I think, I don't know what was initially in the communication, but in the end, what apparently happened, I'm now just quoting, I was not there, that a deputy foreign minister was so to say the counterpart then of the delegation by the US, headed by the US president. Nothing moved on. It was like, oh, they only sent a deputy foreign minister. Here's the president. Lots and lots of misunderstandings. If That's from what I had been told how it was. Copenhagen was a big failure. And between Copenhagen 2009 and the Paris UN conference in 2015, I think, December 2015, it took 6 years of efforts, how to reconcile, how to draw lessons, how to make it better. Now, the Paris Convention was definitely the least common denominator. It's the reference point for today when we speak about climate change. But below that, we still have this ongoing North-South conflict, which I believe is not to be underestimated. You see here this cartoon I took that I found sometimes in 2009, where you have the rather well-nurtured man saying to the gentleman from somewhere South Asia, saying, all you are interested in is development and getting rich, don't you care for the environment? Now, this is a very blunt cartoon, but it puts in a nutshell this unease situation that we had back then. And here I will stop now for the time being, so to have as many questions as possible and later on continue. Please.
Okay, everyone, now it's your time. Raise your hands or just volunteer with a question.
If I might get started.
Oh, Martin.
Yeah, of course. I haven't seen you today. Good morning to Lisbon.
No, actually still here in Moscow.
Martin, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Could you speak up, please?
Oh, sorry,
yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, I hear you very badly.
Now I'm still in Moscow, so.
Yeah, but please speak more loudly.
So I would like to ask. Recently, there's been what they call a Doha amendment to the Kyoto Protocol. I haven't been able to find much information, but do you think this is a way of enticing the United States and Canada to the Kyoto Protocol, or is there other reasons behind this?
Well, the Kyoto Protocol actually has already been replaced. It has been replaced by... Now I hear my echo, which is a bit unfortunate, but the Kyoto Protocol had its role to play in the 1990s, and the Kyoto Protocol was quite far-reaching because it had not only a political leverage, but a normative leverage. Compensation payments, etc., in case of non-compliance. The Paris UN Climate Change Convention of 2015 is now our global reference. It's the text that the United States has said we don't like it, we move out of it. Now, they couldn't do it back in 2018 when Trump announced it. They can only do it now sometimes in 2020 or 21 because of a certain clause that they can move out, I think, only after 2 years. Some other countries might act along the same lines. So another piece of multilateral action that is highly, how should I say, that has become very fragile. What we have is a tremendous rigid regime normative that is envisaged by the European Union. The Green Deal. The Green Deal announced by the EU Commission on 9th of March, against all odds, even though it would have been better to speak on the 9th of March about the pandemic and coordinate efforts then. No, the Green Deal was announced with a very rigid calendar, with a very far-reaching competence by the European Commission, going somehow into the energy mix of the members, which is not really covered legally, I would say. But and the overall criticism by many governments, parties is, while we in the EU, we will be the best behaving climate change people, but our industry will become will not anymore be competitive, if it ever was, with US industry, with Asian, etc. This is the big issue today, and here we have to consider again the current gloomy economic situation. I've only listened yesterday to some of the statements by Mrs. von der Leyen, by Mrs. Christine Lagarde. Lagarde was very, very gloomy on saying this crisis will cost us, I don't know how many years of setback, 9% of loss in economic performance. Where will all the money come from for the 750 billion rescue scheme? Some speak of phantom taxes that the Commission wishes to levy. Very difficult. And how the US now will behave in the whole thing, I must say, maybe I'm not that globalist thinking right now for various reasons, but my immediate concern as European citizen, as Austrian taxpayer, is what will happen to all these big rescue schemes. How will they be financed? What will be the outcome? What will be the tangible results for the employment market? And I'm not that enthusiastic that this Green Deal, that various other greenish concepts could advance, because my gut feeling is that we will all be having another priority: social problems.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Martin. So best regards to your home office in Moscow.
Thank you.
Okay, guys.
Nobody, but this is such a highly emotional topic. It came up before.
Paola again is
please,
raising
Paola.
her hand.
Of course. You are also in Moscow, or you're in Italy?
I'm in Moscow.
Okay.
I was interested because I saw a slide on coal, and I was interested in your opinion about this topic, because Europe, I think it's still dependent from coal, especially Poland, and if I'm not mistaken, Germany too.
Yeah.
So isn't it controversial?
Yeah, no, coal is a very important topic. I mean, when I came across the importance of coal when writing my book, The Energy Poker, that was in 2005, and I realized how important the coal business is for US politics, for the Polish energy mix, as you have rightly said, for the Czech economy, and there's a US notion for coal. It's called king coal. King coal, the fossil fuel that was driving industrial revolution in 19th century, in early 20th century. When Winston Churchill decided to switch from coal-driven vessels for the British fleet to diesel-driven fleets, like the Germans had done, everybody looked at him in his cabinet and said, "Are you crazy? We got coal in Wales, we got coal in England. Why should we start importing oil?" Well, later on, we could see how oil actually started global markets, because our energy reserves were in the beginning were very close. Later on, our energy reserves were even more far distant. Coal is everywhere. Oil you have to import from somewhere. And coal was also always a very emotional topic, like we just had discussed also with the gas pipeline. When coal miners run into troubles, either because they're unemployed or there's a huge disaster, and that we see on a regular level in many countries, especially in China, it becomes a topic. I cannot tell you for what reasons, but I remember as a child, I think I must have been like 14, 15, 16, when Maggie Thatcher was Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She was the one who put this end to a chapter called Manufacturing Made in England. She opened up financial markets, turned London into the financial center. And she said, let's move out of coal. We have to move out of coal. And tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people lost their work. The coal miners' strike was a tremendous challenge to the British government. And such a topic can come up in every country where they still play a role. And my observation is, I'm not involved so much in Polish, Czech, or Serbian politics or so on, just an observer. But in all those countries where coal mining has a role, and not only an economic role in terms of part of the energy mix, but also part of the social grid, I can understand why some governments are reluctant to change that. And in 2006, spring 2006, Austria had then, it's for the second time, its EU presidency. There was an effort in March 2006, after the gas problem, Ukraine transit, etc. The Commission said, let us, please give us, the Commission, more competence in energy so that we can preempt such a crisis next time. All member states said back then, no question. We want to keep our energy mix the way we have it. We want to run our energy policy the way we have been doing that, because in each and every country, it's simply such a highly political topic that affects so many aspects. And let me mention here also one thing that I haven't said yet. I don't know what is the situation in Italy, but I can speak for Austria, Germany, which other countries? Let me reflect. We do not have a genuine energy ministry. We don't have it. In 1973, with the oil price crisis, the US created a US Department of Energy. The Japanese created a Minister of Energy. In the Comecon countries, actually, before the changes of 1989, you had energy ministries, but this is linked to many reasons. When we have today a European Council of Energy Ministers, most of them carry many hats. They are ministers of economy, ministers of infrastructure, ministry of environment, etc., etc. But there was for a small period, I think, under the Sarkozy government, he created, because he had understood, people had understood this is a topic, so he created a super ministère in France, and I don't recall now the name of this minister, but he was quite a political weight. And then he quit it, or he was ousted. I don't recall now. Happened sometimes in 2010. To have such a super ministry can come also as a kind of competition to the prime minister, to others, because this is where things are happening. And I've always been critical of the fact that I can now only speak of Austria. It's not up to me to tell other countries what to do. But in Austria, and also when I spoke to German audiences over the last years, I always said, we speak a lot about energy, but we do not have a decision-making body, a formal one, called Energy Ministry. There is no German energy minister. And it's very federal organized. So, and also when you think of the energy commissioner in the European Union, I must admit right now, I don't even recall the name. The former was Šefčovič. I don't recall now the current name of the new commission. It's a relatively new commission, and the commission has other problems than right now that one. But whether it was Šefčovič, whether it was Oettinger, his predecessor, whether it was, there was a gentleman from Lithuania, they started to understand the topic, they started to learn it. But when they had to coordinate council meetings, the the ministers they invited were not really the ones who were running the energy policy in the country. In many countries, it's a company or several companies. In France, Total. In Britain, BP. In Italy, Eni can have a much bigger say on what is happening in terms of energy policy than the ministry. And then you have the Länder, you have the provinces, the regions. And this is very important in Germany. Very, very important. So the regions have, in many of these topics, a much more leverage than the Bund, the federal chapeau of the whole thing. And this differs from country to country. So this is one thing. France is a fairly centralized country on that. But in France, I think that EDF, Électricité de France, which actually is in charge together with Areva for the nuclear power topic, together with Total, which has a tremendous outreach also on a foreign policy level, they are the real players, much more than any ministry. And this also has to be borne in mind. So it's a web, a cobweb of different actors, interests, situations. And in Europe, in the European Union, we do not have a common energy policy. We talk about it a lot. We oust it and we would say, yes, the Nord Stream topic is affecting the efforts for a common European policy, etc. I don't see it. I don't really see us having something like that and implementing it.
Thank you, Doctor.
You're most welcome.
You have Martin again, I think.
I have one small question, if I might. But regarding Austria specifically, since I'm interested in. So in this new coalition government deal, what would you say with the Green Party between the right OVP and the Greens? What kind of concessions did Sebastian Kurz have to make to Werner Köhler, like on the specific topic of climate change and energy policy? And also another small side question: do you think what happened in Austria can happen, for example, in Germany, where the Green Party is also like 20%? I think.
Yeah. Well, once again, you are enormously well informed also about the names of the place, etc. They negotiated between September and December. And then, surprise, surprise, that comes out, I'm now a little bit ironic, forgive me, that comes out a wonderful coalition agreement, but the big Pferdefuß, as we would say in German, you know, the big inconvenience, the one that is limping, is everything that has to do with green deals, turning the economy greener, etc. All these elements will only start as of 2022. So the first 2 years, tax reforms in terms of making the economy greener, because it's not only about how many more wind farms do you install. This is one thing. I mean, of that we got plenty. But the real issue, if you want to take a green commitment serious, is how do you run your tax system? Where do you put the focus? And to have a fiscal approach in the name of a cleaner environment, this is the real issue. So actually, Chancellor Sebastian Kurz prevailed and had his part in terms of his clientele, which is the economy, that they said, no, we don't want to have more leverage here and there. And the coalition agreement is, to put in a simplified nutshell, the first 2-3 years, everything will remain the same. And then as of 2022, we will start with the elements, the small green partner, which has only 13-something percent at the elections, while the others had nearly 40%, you know. So there's an imbalance. And over the last 2-3 months, what we have seen in Austrian domestic politics going on, because of course, everybody was taken by surprise, the pandemic, but the Green Party is highly contested right now in Austrian also public opinion, even so they are still, I would say, nicely treated by published opinion, maybe not less the public, but the published opinion. But the bottom line is green topics beyond environment, such as transparency, etc., are not really materialized, are not really happening. So it's too early to tell. We are only in the 7th month of this coalition agreement, coalition government. But the green topics, due to the coalition agreement with its timing, but also due to the pandemic, could not yet materialize. And I know that some media comments said in January, oh, how fantastic. This is now an example for many other countries. But again, this is a matter of internal politics, and this watershed line that we are seeing, that we are all living through, will show us most probably that, speaking of Germany, I read German papers a lot, but half a year ago, the Green Party in Germany was like the new big popular party, and CDU was a bit in the shadow. Now, since Chancellor Angela Merkel has been handling the crisis in a very sober and professional way, things have changed again in terms of polls, but all those polls are just a glimpse of momentum. In the end, when you look back at history, and already in 2-3 years, when we look back to spring 2020, we might have a clearer picture, because we then will see what was hit how, what had that as kind of impact, what kind of social issues turned up, etc.
Well, thank you very much.
You're most welcome.
May I ask something?
Please.
You have mentioned nuclear, and you said that the Austrians are almost as sensitive as Germans when it comes to nuclear power. And how about coal? What's the long-term strategy for coal in Austria, or is it at all such a big topic in Austria?
It used to be, but it's not anymore. Every country here in this region has coal mines, but it's not a topic like in our neighboring countries, Czech Republic, Slovakia, or Hungary. It's a much bigger topic there, not in Austria.
Thanks. So
we are lucky. We have so much water, rivers in mountainous areas. So our hydrogen part of our energy mix has always been fairly high. But this is not because we are so greenish. This has simply to do with good luck, with geological situation.
You mean hydropower or hydrogen?
No, sorry, I said hydrogen. Of course, it's hydropower. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, well, it's exactly 12:30. So if there are no other questions, I encourage everyone to join me in thanking Karin for yet another wonderful talk today.
You're most welcome.
Give you a round of applause with this reaction button. Yes, and we'll see each other again next week. Is that correct?
Thank you very much.
Monday as usual.
I wish
Thank you very much.
Each and everybody, wherever you are, all the best, and thank you for the very pertinent questions and for your interest in the topic.
Thank you, Frau Kneissl.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
Next time.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.